Hello everyone, and welcome to Belonging and Belief. And we're really glad to hear you today.
Yes, whether you're listening while studying, relaxing, or just curious about faith, we hope this conversation gives you something to reflect on.
And today we're going to talk about a big theological topic. Now, it might sound complicated, but upon further inspection, it's actually something deep and personal and related to us.
Exactly. When we look around today, many people, especially young people, are trying to figure out where they belong. There's pressure from school, expectations from your family or your friends, social media comparisons, and sometimes even conflict within our community.
And with all of those things happening, faith can sometimes feel distant or even hard to achieve, and we only ever reach out to God when we're in trouble, we want to pass the test, or when we just want something from Him.
But one thing the Bible reminds us is that God has never stopped reaching out to humanity, to us. From the very beginning, God has always wanted a relationship with us.
And that relationship is called a covenant. Now, a covenant is actually just more than a promise, more than a contract. It's a trust between us and God, between us and His people. Us again.
So in today's episode, we'll explore how God's covenant appears in the Bible, how it continues through the sacraments, and how we can actually live it out in our daily lives. One of the earliest covenants is with Noah. After the great flood, God promises to never again destroy the earth with water.
And the sign of that covenant is a rainbow. That rainbow symbolizes that God will never harm us again, and that His faith will be dear to us.
And you know what, John? What's powerful about that story is that even after humanity made mistakes, God still chose mercy instead of giving up on us, on His people.
Another important covenant is with Abraham. God asks Abraham to trust Him and promises him that he will become the father of many nations.
And if you think about it, Abraham's story is actually very relatable. He didn't always know what was going to happen next, but he still chose to trust God.
And if you think about it, that actually happens to us, a lot of us, every day, where we don't know what to do, but we just go on with our days and have blind faith in God and follow Him.
Then, later, we see the covenant with Moses, where God gives the 10 Commandments.
These commandments are not just rules meant to control people, they are actually guidelines that help people live with respect, justice, and love for one another.
And all of these commandments eventually lead to the most important one, the new covenant through Jesus Christ.
And during the Last Supper, Jesus says, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood." That moment shows that God promises become complete through Jesus.
Through His life, death, and resurrection, Jesus restores humanity's relationship with God and shows us the true meaning of love and sacrifice.
At this point, we'd like to hear from our guests, Dom, Mika, and Gab. We've been discussing about big biblical covenants, but how do these actually play out in a classroom setting or when you're dealing with a heavy week?
I think it starts with realizing that God's covenant doesn't depend on how perfect we are. Even when we feel weak or doubtful, God remains faithful.
That really resonates with me because I often struggle with consistency. I used to think that if I missed my morning prayer or got too distracted by school, I was breaking my bond with God. But hearing about the covenant with Noah, it reminds me that God's mercy is constant, like the rainbow, It's not a contract where one mistake cancels everything. It's a relationship that stays open even when I'm overwhelmed.
Exactly, Mika. Looking at Abraham's story, he didn't have a clear path for his life, yet he still chose to trust. As students, we often obsess with the next step, the next exam, the next grade, and a career after graduation. My faith journey is realizing that God is in those uncertain moments too. Faith is not just a feeling of closeness, it's the commitment to keep showing up even when we felt distant.
Comes in for us. It's our reset button. When we receive the Eucharist, we aren't just performing a ritual, we are physically renewing that new covenant Jesus spoke about at the Last Supper.
It's like a reminder that we don't have to earn His love. We just have to accept the invitation in return.
This really changes how we do our to-do list, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If the covenant is a living relationship, then our response shouldn't just be about rules, but about small intentional actions.
For me, that means viewing my studies as a way to honor the talent God gave me. Rather than just source of stress, it means choosing to be a person of integrity during an exam or helping a classmate who is struggling with a test.
And for me, it's about those micro moments of prayer. If I can't spend an hour in reflection, I can at least offer a quick thank you or help me through this during a commute. It's about building that habit of staying connected in the normal moments, not just the crisis.
And don't forget the power of forgiveness. Living the covenant means reflecting God's mercy in our friendships. For example, choosing kindness over anger when a group project gets tense.
Precisely. Whether it's being more present at a Mass or simply being a source of hope for a friend, these small steps are how the new covenant becomes visible in the world today. And slowly, those small actions can take a big difference in the lives of others.
As we wrap this up, I'm struck with the idea that faith isn't something we have to figure out all at once.
It's a journey we grow into. God is the one who initiated this relationship, and He is the one who sustains it.
So, to anyone listening who feels that they've stepped away, don't be too hard on yourself. Just take a small step back toward the sacraments.
God meets you exactly where you are. You don't need to be perfect for everything.
He is patiently waiting, always ready to renew that bond of love.
Thank you for that, and thank you for joining us on Belonging and Belief.
And we hope this conversation helps you feel a little more connected to the one who never stops reaching out to you. At this point,
Ano ba na tingin sa camera?
supported. Welcome back to Belonging and Belief. And if you're just joining us, we've been talking about big biblical covenants and how it connects to us every day.
Earlier, we discussed how God made covenants with Noah, Moses, and Abraham, and how all those point toward the new covenant through Jesus. But now, we want to bring that closer to something more personal. Our everyday experiences, especially as students.
You're right about that, Soph. And honestly, as students, life can get so overwhelming. Deadlines, group works, exams, everything can feel like it's all happening at once.
Yep, and in the middle of all that, faith can sometimes feel like a backseat. Not because we don't care, but because we're just trying to keep up.
So to help us reflect on that, we invite Mika to share his experience.
Hi Mika, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Mika, as a student, how has your experience been when it comes to balancing school and your faith?
For me, it's still something that I struggle with. There are times when I try to be consistent, like praying or reflecting, but then school gets busy, and I ended up focusing more on that. It's not that I stop believing, but I get distracted or overwhelmed. Sometimes, I don't even realize that I've gone through the day without really thinking about my faith.
Yeah, it's very relatable.
I also noticed that I tend to only pray when I need something, like when I'm stressed. But when everything is okay, I sometimes forget. And that made me realize that my relationship with God shouldn't be just about asking for help, but also about staying connected even in normal moments.
Thank you for that, Mika. And as we know, being a student comes with a lot of responsibility and pressure from family and even as individuals. So we invited Dom to share his perspective as well on this podcast.
Hi, Dom. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So Dom, how do you personally experience your faith as a student?
For me, faith has its ups and downs. There are times when I feel really close to God, especially when I pray or reflect. But there are also times when I feel distant, especially when I get busy. I think a lot of students can relate to that, feeling close at all times and distant at others. But I realize that faith is not about always feeling close. It's about continuing relationship even if it's hard.
And that connects to what you were saying earlier about the covenant.
Yes, because the covenant is a relationship, and in relationships, there's moments where you fulfill it, and there are moments where you can break it.
Remains faithful even when we struggle to stay faithful.
So how do we experience that covenant today?
Through the sacraments like baptism, which makes us part of God's family.
Yes, in confirmation, which strengthens in our faith, and especially the Eucharist, where we don't just remember Jesus, we encounter Him.
Before we end, we would like to hear again from Montante, this time together with Mika and Tom, as they share their learnings and advice with our viewers.
Sure. For me, I realized that it's not okay not to have everything together. Faith doesn't require perfection. Even small moments like a short prayer already matter, always. And for me, it's about more building the habit of staying connected, even in simple ways.
For me, I realized that faith is really a journey. And it's okay if it's not always consistent. For anyone who is struggling, don't be too hard on yourself. Instead of focusing on what you're lacking, just focus on taking small steps, like praying, reflecting, or going to the sacrament when you can.
And lastly, what about you, God?
Well, one of the biggest things I realized is that God's covenant is not something we have to win or to earn. Even when we feel like we're not enough, God remains faithful. And I think many people struggle with feeling unworthy. But the truth is, God meets us where we are and invites us to grow from there.
Thank you for that. Honestly, hearing their perspective and experiences, I also realized that faith isn't about being perfect, but about being willing to try again through small actions, like you said, prayer, kindness, or forgiveness. Or even just being more present during Mass in our daily lives. We slowly grow in our relationship with God.
And before we officially end, I hope everyone learned something, and I hope you remember that faith isn't something you figure out all at once. It's something that you grow into.
Yes, and God continues to invite us every day in different ways. Even when we feel busy or distracted, God is still present. And even when we step away, He never stops reaching out to us.
And remember, a covenant and faith is like a relationship. It's built on trust, persistence, patience, and love.
And that wraps everything up.